Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA predictions for UFC 129 St-Pierre versus Shields. Before getting into my picks, Strikeforce Diaz versus Daly did not turn out the way I was hoping. I went 1-2-1 overall. I think for the most part, Daly got sucked into playing Diaz's game, and instead of constantly pressing forward like he usually does, he allowed Nick to back him against the cage, which really limited Paul's ability to avoid being hit. Either way, I'm now 9-9 predicting Strikeforce fights, so I'll have to work on that. My overall record of 77-36 was just over 68% correct. I'd still like to reach 75% though. For UFC 129, I'll be predicting 7 fights, 2 on Spike, and the 5 main card fights. UFC 129 will be the first UFC event held in Ontario at Toronto's Rogers Centre, April 30th, 2011. As always, check out and comment on my rankings, Kamikaze Countdown, and my predictions. I put together a slightly different look for my main event predictions, so let me know what you think about that. And before we get to the actual picks, I'd like to announce that I will be co-hosting LowKick.com's new podcast entitled Split Decision, along with LowKick's Ryan Ventura. Our first show will be a pre-show for UFC 129. For more details, you can check out LowKick.com closer to the event. And now it's time to get to the predictions. Kicking off the televised prelims on Spike, we have welterweight Sean Pearson, 11-4, battling injury replacement Jake the Juggernaut Ellenberger, 24-5, who will be filling in for Brian Foster. Pearson is looking to build upon a victory in his promotional debut, while Ellenberger is riding a 3-fight winning streak. I have Ellenberger as the betting favorite and at $1.25 and Pearson at $3.05. Looking first at Pearson, he got off to a great start in his last tilt, but in my opinion was barely able to hang on under the pressure of his resurgent opponent. Pearson's striking has got the job done so far, but it is fairly one-dimensional. His primary method of attack is a combination straight right followed by a left hook. When he jabs with his right, he jumps in and out effectively and will also use a tie clinch and knees. Ellenberger has knockout power in his hands, and he's fairly fast on his feet. He rocked Carlos Condit with his right, and I like the way he pushes forward while throwing strikes, all with bad intentions. And he will mix in some leg kicks to change things up. On the mat, both fighters have submission wins to their credit. Pearson has notched 4, while Ellenberger has 5. Each man has only been tapped out once. Sean is the BJJ purple belt and Jake a blue belt. Both fighters will use takedowns, and each has solid ground and pound with finishing capabilities. I like Pearson's use of knees to the side of an opponent on the mat, a la his training partner GSP. But Ellenberger, with his wrestling pedigree, will have the advantage on the mat. He should have no problem putting Pearson on his back and then keeping him there. On the flip side, Jake's takedown defense is very good and should be more than enough to defend against Pearson's takedown attempts. The deciding factor for this fight could be Pearson's gas tank. Pearson gassed early in the second stanza in his last fight and then struggled when Riddle began to walk him down. Ellenberger will be looking to rebound from his lackluster performance last time he was inside the octagon, and even with the short preparation time, he should be able to dictate the pace of this fight. If I was a betting man, which clearly I am, I'd put my money in Ellenberger's heavy hands and takedowns to be the difference maker. Sean will be buoyed by 55,000 people in his hometown, but that won't be enough, so my pick is Jake Ellenberger to defeat Sean Pearson by stoppage. Remaining in the welterweight division, 13-6 Nate Diaz will battle 10-1 Rory the Waterboy McDonald. McDonald is returning after his first career defeat against Carlos Condit, while Diaz is looking to rebound from his loss to Young Kim. I have UFC veteran Diaz as the slight favorite at $1.55 and McDonald at $1.85. Just like his brother Nick, Nate doesn't possess one-punch knockout power, but he throws an abundance of punches that basically wears his opponent down. Combining this with his ability to constantly push the pace and his usual reach advantage, it can result in an opponent becoming overwhelmed as the fight progresses into later stages. Nate's tilt with Marcus Davis was a pretty good snapshot of this. McDonald's striking is still developing, but he has stopped opponents in the past. Against Carlos Condit, he showed that he is most effective when he uses his head movement to set up his counter-striking. On multiple occasions, he was able to avoid Condit's strikes and land his own, although he never really connected with anything that was overly devastating. And Rory likes to be aggressive. He takes the center of the octagon and he walks his opponent down. On the negative side, against both Condit and Mike Neumann, Rory got tagged with a big shot, so there are openings in the stand-up. Leading to the ground game, Rory has multiple ways of taking an adversary down. He will tie up and drop for a single or use a trip. Even more impressively, he will duck under his opponent's punches and shoot, or he will catch a kick and complete the takedown. His takedowns were the primary weapon against Condit. He was able to take him down, but for the most part, Carlos was able to neutralize Rory's top game with a solid guard, something that Nate possesses. But in his UFC debut, McDonald did show his submission skills when he tapped Goyman, and he has 6 subs on record. Nate Diaz is a product of the Cesar Gracie camp. He is a BJJ brown belt, and with a black belt like his brother Nick, Nate is more than tested on the mat, and he has 9 submission wins. The downfall of Diaz's mat game is his struggles with strong grapplers. Clay Guida exposed this issue, and most recently Dong Young Kim was able to put Nate on his back and grind out a decision. This is a tough fight to call. Diaz will have the technical striking advantage, but McDonald will have a slight reach advantage, something that Diaz normally has and is able to exploit. And the pressure Rory brings could help him disrupt Nate's striking. Diaz's submission game is always a threat, and because McDonald was able to take the bigger Carlos Condit down, he should be able to take Diaz down, so we will see lots of action on the mat. Diaz has fantastic cardio, and it really showed up in the later stages of his last fight, while conversely McDonald faded at the end of his fight, which ultimately cost him. I was really torn on how this one might go down until I came across the fact that McDonald opted to train at the TriStar Gym in Montreal with GSP. That relationship should help the youngster improve his both mental and physical aspects of his game. McDonald had a set game plan for the Condit fight and followed it almost all the way to victory. Look for McDonald to continually put Nate on his back and attempt to control him much the same way Rory did against Condit and Kim did against Diaz. So my prediction is Rory McDonald to defeat Nate Diaz by decision. Kicking off the pay-per-view, we had the former WEC lightweight champion Ben "Smooth" Henderson 12-2, taking on 9-2 Mark Bocek. Bocek has been victorious in 3 of his last 4, while Henderson dropped his final bout in the WEC, but had picked up 10 wins prior to the defeat. On the books, I think the betting odds could be quite close, probably at $1.65 each. Starting on the feet, Mark Bocek has never knocked anyone out, and his lone TKO victory came as a result of an injury. Bocek likes to lead with his left, using either a jab or a left hook. He did drop Frankie Edgar, but that fight was more indicative of the inadequacies of Bocek's striking. Edgar's hand speed gave Mark all kinds of trouble. He got rocked on several occasions and really was unable to get his game plan in motion. Now Mark does have a solid chin, and he likes to push his opponent into the cage using knees to wear on them before looking for the takedown. His opponent, Ben Henderson, is incredibly calm in the cage, and Smooth is a perfect name for him. Anthony Pettis threw everything he had at Ben, and Henderson never seemed to get rattled and just kept doing his thing, so I wouldn't expect Bocek will offer much in the stand-up that Henderson won't be able to deal with. Now Ben has deceptive power in his hands, and showed it when he rocked Shane Roller and then finished him. He has crisp kicks that are effective, but I find that he gets away from them and doesn't use them nearly enough. Henderson also has a great chin. He has never been knocked out and has taken some serious blows. Roller rocked him, but Ben rebounded and quickly turned that fight around. Anthony Pettis connected on several occasions, especially with that last kick, and Ben bent but never broke. Transitioning to the ground, Ben Henderson has demonstrated incredible resiliency when locked in a submission hold, most notably against Donald Cerrone in their first meeting. Henderson seems to be able to relax, endure, and outlast his opponent and wait for the submission to break down. As a BJJ brown belt, he's equally capable of completing submissions. He was able to quickly tap out Cerrone and also caught Jamie Varner and Anthony Njokuani. His takedowns are solid, electing to grab a single leg and then trip his opponent as he pushes them forward, or he will grab double underhooks and drag his adversary down. Now Mark Bocek will put Henderson's submission defense to the test. He is a BJJ black belt, and something that Henderson has never faced in his career, and Bocek has secured 7 of his 9 wins via tap out. His systematic step-by-step submission of second-degree black belt Dustin Hazlett demonstrated just how skilled Bocek is. He has 3 submission wins inside the octagon, but in my opinion, his battle with Jim Miller was the most indicative of what the Canadian can do on the mat. Miller is an NCAA wrestler and fellow BJJ black belt, and Mark was able to take him down several times, control him, took his back while trapping his arm with a body lock, mounted him, and even though he lost, he did a good job of things in that fight. Mark has very difficult takedowns to defend against, and he doesn't hesitate to go for them right away. His game plan is simple but effective. He drives his opponent into the cage and will grab a single, lifting it up in order to dump his opponent on the mat. Even more impressively, when Bocek locks his hands, he can pick up his opponent and slam them to the canvas. For me, this matchup will probably spend a great deal of time in the clinch and on the mat. We know Henderson has good sub-defense because he gets locked in submissions frequently. Against a black belt like Bocek, that is ill-advised. Outside of the top 2 UFC lightweights, Bocek has had the best showing of any fighter against Jim Miller, which speaks volumes about what Mark is capable of. Ben is most effective when his opponent allows him time to set up, which Mark will not. Look for Bocek to continually push Henderson into the cage and take him down. I don't know if Bocek will be able to submit Henderson, but I expect he will be able to control him on the mat. So my prediction is Mark Bocek to defeat Ben Henderson by decision. Moving to the light heavyweight division is Randy the Natural Couture, 19-10, will battle 16-2, Lyoto the Dragon Machida. Machida has dropped 2 fights in a row and is looking to rebound, while Randy is riding a 3-fight winning streak. On the books, I have Randy as a 3.5 to 1 underdog, while Machida pays out at $1.20. This matchup provides a real contrast of styles. On one hand, you have Couture, who is all about control. He's at the top of his game when he can grind his opponent along the cage wall. On the other hand, you've got Machida, who fights from the outside, using distance and footwork to avoid his opponent at all costs. Examining the veteran first, Randy likes to jab with his left and will follow with an uppercut. He has decent head movement, ducking away from his opponent's strikes, and with the correct timing, he can drop down and complete a takedown. In this fight, he will need to cut off the cage and force Machida to engage him. Conversely, when he allows his opponent to create separation, he has problems. Big Nog landed several right hands and dropped Randy, and Brandon Vera was able to deliver some nasty leg kicks along with a knee that crumpled Couture. The Natural is far more dangerous when he closes the distance, especially when he can back his adversary against the wall. From there, he is difficult to shake off. He was able to control Gabe Gonzaga along the cage wall, where he remains constantly busy. Randy throws knees, elbows, punches, grinds his head into his opponent's face, and will suplex his adversary to the mat. In his wins against Gonzaga and Vera, he was able to keep them on the cage, and in his defeats against Lesnar and Nog, he wasn't able to control them, and that exhibits what Randy needs to do in order to be successful. For Machida, it will be business as usual. Be elusive. When engaging, Lyoto has brutal leg kicks. His low and high kicks are good, but I really like when he attacks the body. Machida's right body kick is devastating and could play a deciding factor in this fight if he can land it. But a kick could provide Randy an opportunity to grab on Machida and close the distance. Lyoto will also integrate a knee to the body, leaping in to deliver it from the outside. Timed properly, Machida could land a knee as Randy attempts to duck a punch. Machida has very fast hands, and his knockouts of Thiago Silva and Rashad Evans are proof positive of the power he possesses. Juxtaposed to Couture, the Dragon likes to dart in an attack, then circle away. He lands his strikes and then simply fades away before his opponent can engage. The barrage of strikes he put on Rashad Evans were accurate and above all else, almost undefendable. The speed at which Machida comes forward can make it difficult for his opponent to avoid taking damage. This is an area that could concern Randy, as he had a difficult time dealing with Big Nog's hand speed when they exchanged. Machida also uses a lot of feints, which could create openings if Randy reacts. On the mat, Couture has incredible submission defense. He hasn't been tapped out since 2002, and Minotauro had him locked in a couple of deep submissions that Randy was able to endure. Randy has good top control, working to hold his opponent down while doing damage. His submission game isn't a huge threat, with only 4 on record, and that includes James Toney. Lyoto is a BJJ black belt, but only has 2 submissions on record. He is quite capable on the mat, but because he is so proficient with his striking, his submission game is something we very rarely see. The referee can also play a huge role in this fight. Couture's ability to pin Machida along the wall will be impacted by how long the referee allows him to stay in that position without restarting them. An impatient ref is not a good thing for Couture. When it comes down to it, the deciding factor for me is the difficulty past opponents have had getting their hands on Machida and then controlling him. In his fight with Tito, Machida was easily shrugged off Ortiz's takedown attempts. When they engaged along the wall, Machida controlled Tito, even taking him down. And finally, I like the way Machida used a push to create separation when his opponent got too close. Having listened to the instructions of the cornermen of Couture's opponents, especially Brandon Vera, they kept pleading with their fighter to stop standing in front of Randy, and this is something that Machida will do naturally. It has been said that Randy's style is tailor-made to defeat Machida, but I think Lyoto's approach is the perfect remedy for Couture's wall install, because you can't control someone you can't get a hold of. Look for Machida to circle away from Couture, avoiding the clinch, and eventually land a heavy body kick or a flurry of strikes. So my pick is Lyoto Machida to defeat Randy Couture by stoppage. Continuing in the light heavyweight division, Vladimir the Janitor Matyushenko, 25-5, will battle Jason Hitman Brills, 18-3-1. The Janitor has won 4 of his last 5, while Brills has gone 3-2 in the UFC, and he's walking into this fight off a tough split decision loss to Little Nog. I have Vladimir as the slight favorite, around $1.60, and Brills the underdog at $2. Looking at their 2 careers side by side, these fighters have faced several mutual opponents, the most notable fighters being Elliot Marshall, Tim Boach, and Little Nog. Brills is 1-2 in those matchups with a win over Boach, and Vladimir is 3-1 going 1-1 against Nogueira. But if picking a winner was that easy, we'd all be rich. Both of these men have wrestling backgrounds, and both have transitioned these skills to the octagon. Brills used his takedown and impressive ground control to rebound from a shaky opening against Boach, and again when he nearly pulled off a big upset of Little Nog. Brills can either use a mistake to store the takedown or initiate it on his own. He is good at timing his opponent's attacks, then grabbing a kick or ducking under a fighter's punches to complete the takedown. He will initiate a clinch and drag the fight to the mat, sometimes using a body lock and a trip to put his adversary on their back. When he gets the fight to the ground, he keeps tight to his opponent or to his opposition and smothers them. If he sees an opening, Brills will attempt to improve his position, not being content to simply stay in guard. If he is able to successfully pass to side control or mount, he will use hammer fist or work for a submission. He has 9 submission victories using various holds and has forced multiple opponents to tap because of strikes. During a transition, if the wrestler is unable to maintain control, he is an excellent scrambler, showcasing this many times in the Boch fight. When Boch created some distance, Brills was able to recover and reestablish control. Vladimir Matyushenko's grappling skills are equally as impressive. Matyushenko possesses good takedowns and takedown defense. In his UFC re-debut, he put Igor Vokrajic on the mat with a perfectly executed lateral drop, and excluding John Jones, Vladdy has shown the ability to control his opponents with his grappling. In his last fight, he defeated a very good grappler by using his wrestling skills to keep the fight standing, only taking the fight to the mat when he was in control. Comparing the fighter's stats, UFC.com has the janitor defending 70% of his takedowns and completing 40%, while Brills resided at 25% in both categories. These stats can be deceiving, but upon further investigation, there are a few points of interest that have me leaning towards the janitor in the grappling department. When the Hitman was defeated by Elliot Marshall, it was because of his inability to take Marshall to the mat, which resulted in Brills getting picked apart on the feet. Conversely, Matyushenko was able to secure a pair of takedowns versus Marshall, and that fight took place after the Marshall-Brills fight, which would suggest that Marshall's takedown defense should have been the same or even better than when he met Brills. Against Boch, Brills lost the opening round because he couldn't get the fight to the mat, and his corner implored him to stop boxing and get the takedown. These two scenarios indicate to me that if Brills is unable to score the takedown, he is at a disadvantage in most fights. Brills' stand-up consists of a 1-2 combination, jabbing with his left and following it up with a right hook. He will also use the left jab on its own, looking to counter off his opponent's strikes. His right hand is where his power lies, but because his technique is average at best, he struggles to land and often coming up short with his punches. Vladimir, on the other hand, has shown marked improvement in his striking. He too will lead with his left, both a jab and a looping left hook with power, and he has a stiff straight which stumbled with little nog. He will change levels when he attacks, keeping his hands up and circles away to avoid damage. Vladdy will also work along the cage, pressing his opponent to the wall and delivering knees and short elbows. In this fight, you have 2 grapplers, one that will be using their skills to put the fight on the mat, and the other that will use their wrestling to keep the fight standing. If Vladimir can defend Brills' takedown attempts, this will greatly impact this fight. Matyushenko will have a 3-inch reach advantage, which could make it difficult for Jason to have success when they exchange. I like taking the fighter that has more ways of winning a fight. On the feet, Vladdy is the better striker, and even if Brills is able to get the fight to the mat, I have seen nothing overly definitive that would suggest that he would be the better of the 2 grapplers. So my prediction is Vladimir Matyushenko to defeat Jason Brills by decision. In the co-main event of the night, the UFC featherweight title will be defended by Jose Aldo, 18-1, against the challenger, 20-8, Mark the Machine Hominick. This will be Aldo's 3rd defense of his title, and he is riding an 11-fight winning streak. Mark Hominick enters this fight having won 5 in a row and 7 of his last 8. On the books, I had the champ as the favorite at $1.15 and Hominick at $3.90. These 2 combatants have combined for 21 TKO or KO victories, but I'm going to start on the mat. Hominick has been tapped out 5 times in his career, so he is susceptible to a fighter with submission skills. On the other hand, he has earned 7 submission victories. His most recent submission win came when his opponents put him on the mat and he was able to catch them in a sub. Hominick is not going to shoot on Aldo, and seeing as that Aldo is a BJJ black belt, it isn't very likely that he'll be able to tap out the champion. Despite being a black belt, Jose's only secured 2 submission wins, and his lone defeat came via rear naked choke. Again, I would be shocked if either fighter was heading to Toronto looking to take his opponent down and submit them. The most likely of scenarios would be a knockdown followed by ground and pound. Hominick finished off George Roop with a little G&P, and he showed Ween in a similar fashion. For the champ, I was quite impressed with the control he exhibited against the town of wrestlers in Uriah Faber and Mike Brown. In both those fights, he was able to effortlessly control, mount, and take the back of each opponent. He scored a ref stoppage of Brown, and he had similar success against Manny Gambarian. If this bout does hit the ground, I have to give the edge to Aldo. Now transitioning to the striking, Mark's boxing is very technical. He's accurate, quick, and makes his punches count. In his fight with Jabouin was able to was attacking aggressively, but Hominick was still able to land his strikes with success. He will lead with either hand, putting together slick combinations, doubling up the jab, and following with power. He will attack the body, most notably with a devastating liver punch. He uses leg strikes, not as much as I would like to see him do that, but the thing I would like most about Mark is his in-ring demeanor. He keeps constant pressure on his opponent, walking him down. Even in the Jabouin fight where he was being peppered relentlessly, Mark kept pushing forward, landing his strikes, and either absorbing or avoiding his opponents. Now, against power like Aldo, that would create some problems. The challenger's defense will be key to his success. Hominick has excellent footwork, he moves in and out and laterally, but all the while keeping pressure on his opponent. A lot of fighters move back and forth, but without lateral movement to change the point of attack, their opponents still know for the most part where they'll be attacking from. Hominick also uses his movement to get away from his adversary's strikes, or at least lessen their impact when they do land. He has good head movement, allowing him to avoid being hit, while at the same time setting up his own strikes. He has 2 TKO defeats on his career. One was from a slam and the other the result of a cut, so in reality his chin is solid and finally his endurance is top notch. The champion is far more creative with his striking, although throws knees with incredible accuracy. Cub Swanson can attest to this. He never restricts his attack to one area, targeting his opponent's entire body. He has big-time power in his hands, and they are lightning fast. Because of his speed, his combinations can consist of just about anything. Jab, hook, knee, or jab, uppercut, leg kick. The combinations are endless and all equally lethal. But his leg strikes are probably the most influential. Against Faber, he took away the challenger's mobility and won that fight primarily with his kicks. Hominick will need to be aware of this, as in past fights he has opted to leave leg kicks unchecked. To date, Jose has seemed almost untouchable on the feet. He moves fluidly, remaining calm, keeping out of the range, and doesn't take a lot of damage. In past fights, all those opponents have stood directly in front of him, which allows for 2 things: Jose to set up his strikes and evade theirs. But Faber and Gambarian had the most success against Junior when they were the aggressor and had Jose backing up. Manny worked quite effectively in round 1, moving in and out, and in a similar fashion, Faber was able to land the majority of his strikes before the leg kicks made him a stationary target. Mark Hominick has been pushing the statement that Aldo has never faced a striker of his caliber, and having rewatched a number of his fights, I have to agree with the challenger. In most fights, Aldo has been the faster and all-around better striker, but they were against fighters that not known for their stand-up, guys that were wrestlers first and strikers second. At 129, Aldo will have the speed advantage, but I like Hominick's use of movement and angles. We really haven't seen Jose under pressure, and I think that Hominick is going to provide us with that opportunity. I think that Gambarian saw the success that Faber had when he attacked Aldo and tried to duplicate it. Unfortunately, he didn't have the tools to complete the job. Mark Hominick will need to pressure and attack Aldo and not allow him to set up, and in the Jabouin fight, Hominick demonstrated the ability to do this. Jose Aldo will be a big step up from that bout, and this pick will probably be as unpopular as my Chael Sonnen Anderson Silva prediction, but I'm going to take Mark Hominick to pull off the upset and knock out Jose Aldo to become the new UFC featherweight champion. And now it's time for the main event.
Ladies and gentlemen, the challenger, Jake Shields! And now introducing the UFC champion, George Rush St-Pierre!
UFC 129's main event will be for the welterweight championship as George Rush St-Pierre, 21-2, defends his title against the challenger, 26-4-1 Jake Shields. George is making his 6th title defense and has won 8 in a row in 14 of his last 15 bouts, while Jake is riding an impressive 15-fight winning streak, spanning back to 2005. On the books, I have the champion as the favorite at $1.20 and the challenger at $3.50. All fights start on the feet, so we will start there too. It seems that just about every matchup, the key to Jake Shields' opponent's success is to keep the fight standing. Jake is so dominant on the mat, we have seen little of his striking. What we have seen is that Jake will use a low kick to attack his opponent's legs, and he can throw this at will because he has no qualms about being put on his back. His boxing is fairly stiff, and more than once you have heard an announcer remark about how uncomfortable he looks when he's on his feet. But at the same time, in the Kampmann fight, the Dutch striker was hesitant to attack because of the constant threat of being put on his back. Against Dan Henderson, Shields got clipped early, and even though he got dropped, his ability to recover from the H-bomb when others have gone out shows just how tough Shields really is. But GSP is the better striker. Against Josh Koscheck, George put on a clinic using his left jab to decimate the challenger. In that fight, George utilized his reach advantage and superior speed advantage, two advantages that he will have in this fight. George is able to keep distance between himself and his opponent before darting in, delivering his strikes, and then retreating, resulting in a lot of swinging and missing by his opponents. St-Pierre will use kicks, targeting the inside and outside of the legs and the body. George will need to be mindful when he does kick, as this will be an opportunity for Jake to grab hold and put GSP on his back. In the power department, I have to give George the edge as well. Even though one-punch knockout power isn't a staple of his attack, there are lots of examples of how devastating his strikes are. The head kick that he delivered to Matt Hughes, the punch that he floored John Fitch with, and most recently the damage he inflicted on Koscheck's face. Transitioning to the mat, this is where Jake Shields is the best. He is a BJJ black belt under Cesar Gracie and holds 10 career submission wins, 0 submission defeats, and if you look at his decision victories over Jason Miller, Dan Henderson, and Martin Kampmann, you can see that Jake's grappling is at another level. St-Pierre is a BJJ black belt as well, but I don't put him at the same level as Jake with the submission skills. When GSP took on Dan Hardy, George was able to control Dan on the mat and attempted multiple submissions, but was not able to complete them, which sometimes resulted in GSP losing his position. In past fights, George has, with great success, attempted to beat his adversaries at their own game. Should he attempt to do this against Shields, that could be a very costly mistake. When Jake gets his opponent on the mat, it doesn't take long for him to gain a dominant position. He keeps very tight on the body and slowly advances. Shields will use his legs to tie up his opponent's legs, which neutralizes their ability to use their guard. From this position, he will pull his opponent's hips out from under them in an effort to flatten them out. He will then move to half guard and then promptly to full mount, where he has excellent top control from which he can either ground and pound or work for a submission. If he gets your back, Jake has a number of victories via rear naked choke and demonstrated a neutralizing body triangle against Kampmann. His takedowns are good, but not unstoppable. He doesn't possess an explosive shot. Jake needs to get in close, initiate a clinch, and either drop down for a single or use a body lock and drag his opponent down. This is where George should have a slight advantage. He has dominated top level wrestlers in the past with both his ability to take them down and defend against their shot. Now George has left openings in the past fights that have resulted in his opponent getting on top. At the end of round 1, Koscheck was able to score a takedown, and against Fitch, George found himself on the bottom when Fitch was able to scramble to a top position. Now that is something that Jake does very well. His ability to maintain a dominant position and continually roll with his opponent as they attempt to defend is impressive. Overall, I would call the wrestling a draw. GSP has better takedowns and takedown defense, and even though he has demonstrated remarkable control over a downed opponent, I like Jake's grappling skills when the fight does hit the mat. He makes fewer mistakes, and his ability to dominate Dan Henderson for 4 rounds was extraordinary. Endurance could be the deciding factor in this fight. 4 of GSP's last 5 fights have gone 5 rounds, and he is more than capable of going 1-5 with no real drop-off in performance. Jake, on the other hand, had major issues with cardio against Kampmann. It could be attributed to the weight cut from 185 to 170, as Shields gassed just over 2 minutes into the second round. Looking back at the Jason Miller fight, which was at 185, Jake didn't gas out as hard, but he did show signs of slowing down in the later stages. Jake has excellent submission defense, but when he begins to tire, the disadvantage he has on the feet becomes far more glaring. Combining George's superior cardio with his ability to avoid taking damage on the feet and an 86% takedown defense, I would give him the overall advantage in defense. Now Jake's best opportunity to win this fight will be to catch George in a submission, probably inside the first 2 rounds. George will look to keep things standing and implement a game plan similar to the one he used against Koscheck, and in that fight he had a 3-inch reach advantage. At 129, it will increase to 4 inches. I would expect that at some point Shields is going to get his hands on George and potentially put him on the mat, which could quickly quiet 55,000 people. That being said, even when he was fresh, Shields was unable to submit Kampmann, Henderson, or Miller. Kampmann and Miller made Jake work very hard from bell to bell, and even though Jake secured multiple dominant positions, he was unable to submit them. It was quite evident that if Kampmann had elected to strike with Shields when Jake gassed, he could have ended that fight. I would expect that St-Pierre will look to strike early, force Shields to expend a lot of energy attempting takedowns and grappling if the fight does go to the mat. When George feels that Jake is sufficiently winded, I wouldn't be surprised if St-Pierre attempted his own takedowns and ground and pound. So my prediction is George St-Pierre to defeat Jake Shields by stoppage and retain his UFC welterweight title. Welcome to Kamikaze Countdown. The thing I want to touch upon here is coming out of the last Strikeforce show, there's a lot of questions about who's left for Nick Diaz to face at welterweight. A lot of people talking George St-Pierre if Nick does not go to boxing, like there's a lot of rumors floating around that he potentially could be and he very well might be. More importantly, Gilbert Melendez, when he ran through Tatsuya Kawajiri, he called out the UFC lightweights. That could be very interesting. I'd like to see him fight KJ Noons, but after that, big questions as to who's still out there. Maybe Jorge Masvidal, that could be an interesting fight. There are rumors floating around. This could just be a rumor, but Jim Miller potentially heading to Strikeforce to fight for the title. I like that move. It adds a very interesting fight there. If he wins or loses, then he's got a whole fresh slate of fighters to take on. You know, he's lost to Gray Maynard, he lost to Frankie Agnew, he has to wait up to see if Anthony Pettis gets a shot. It could be over a year before Jim Miller gets a shot at the lightweight title. So why not go to Strikeforce, get a payday, get a high-profile fight. If he wins that, he maintains his position as the top lightweight. If he loses that, he lost to a champion. You know, certainly doesn't knock him down that far in the rankings. He could easily recover. But I think we could start seeing, I know Dana says business as usual, but I really think we could start seeing some crossover bouts in the near future, probably by the end of 2011. So again, please comment on my Kamikaze Countdown. If there's fights you want to see, post them. I'm curious to see what fans want to see. We saw Gus Johnson talk about Kung Lee versus Anderson Silva. I don't want to see that one particularly, but there are fights out there I definitely want to see happen. So those are my predictions for UFC 129. You can see the odds and payout on the KO betting card. I won't be attending the fight, but I plan to make the trip down to the expo, which should be a great time. Please feel free to comment on anything and everything you saw on this show. And again, check out lowkick.com for the podcast. It should probably be up on the site during the final week before UFC 129. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you back here for my next set of predictions in a very short period of time.